Sweet. Alrighty, so this is the 20th episode of the podcast, and give a quick shout out to our partner, sponsor, Serpent Brewing, my good friend Glenn O'Keefe, who's brewing the most ridiculously delicious beer in his basement. God damn it, it's incredible. So he's looking to expanding that into the market and selling his beer and growing that as a business. So yeah, everyone should keep their eyes peeled for Serpent Brewing. It's good shit. I'm here today with Lindsay McPhee, owner of the Floatation Centre in Halifax. I think it's like the first floating place on the East Coast, wasn't it?
Yeah, first one in Atlantic Canada. There was a space like way back in the 80s that had like a float tank and a hotel, but in terms of like straight up sensory deprivation, we the first.
That's awesome.
And the best.
And the best, naturally, for sure. I actually floated when I was in Saskatchewan at one point, and it was suboptimal. It wasn't as good.
Oh, was that your first time floating, or you just did you float with us first, and then you just happened to be there and try it out? And
yep.
You just
I floated with you guys plenty of times
before that. Yeah.
They just didn't like the place. Seemed more like a general kind of health/boutique store, like a massage place or something, and then they just got this tank just to kind of add that into the mix, which is cool, but so the tank wasn't good. It let light in, and
that's a problem. Like I mean, sometimes people are even they look at our tanks and think, oh, they're like an older model. It's like, well, yes, however, they really do their job well, whereas a lot of the newer ones do let some like noise pollution and light pollution in. That said, you know, for most people, it's like, do what makes you feel comfortable. But it's always a little bit of a bummer to hear that people have had maybe like a less than great experience, because you know that you can. I like to think that we do really, really well, right? So, yeah. Did you do that when you were traveling?
Yeah.
Yeah, cool.
Yeah. I only got to float once that whole time.
Holy smokes.
It was alright.
Your body could have used it.
Well, when I was excited to get back to Halifax. Well, part of why I stopped traveling was because I just was... I was upset with the toll it was taking on my health. You know, I had no control over my diet, no control over my, you know. But I feel like I also was working through like my own barriers in a way at the time too. That like, you know, I could have meditated more while I was traveling. Yeah. I could have done more yoga. I could have been slightly more selective with what I put in my body. Yeah. When the option was there. So, you know, I also see how I could have taken care of myself better. But nonetheless, I did miss floating, and I was excited to land in a place where I could actually get it going again regularly. No, it's good even just to have that, even if it wasn't the best experience, at least even just having that disconnect and just doing something that was strictly for yourself is kind of like enough to kind of interrupt that pattern that you can get into of just like, oh, my body, oh, my health, oh, these gray hairs. Yeah, exactly. Well, it's interesting how it's the experiences. Well, we touched about this when we were just talking earlier, but about how the things that really force you to grow are not pleasant necessarily. The things that really bond you to other people are not necessarily pleasant experiences that you've shared. It's like, you know, the really true friendships you look back on and you say, we've been through hell and back together. Yeah.
Well, I would like to think like you could have an equally level, if you could measure this, of joyous experience and an equally level of maybe a traumatic experience. And I bet it's the more traumatic or the more challenging experience that maybe where you had to work together would be the ones that would keep you closer than just like, oh, we went to Malibu for a weekend and it was the best weekend ever, you know? So I think...
We got so fucked up.
I was so crazy. But, and I mean, I think, I hope that we all like to, like, you know, mingle around joy and have fun around joy. But I know that it's those sometimes, like, those hard challenges, those bottoms are growth. Like, they just equate to growth no matter what afterwards. So I hope that you grew a lot from Saskatchewan floating.
Yeah, in part, for sure. For sure. Absolutely. So what were you up to before doing all this with the flotation tank and
I used to be an engineer. So I was working as like my formal education was like a chemical environmental engineer. But I always wanted to do more environmental work, and it just thought it was going to be where I was going to make an impact, and then realized quickly I was like, oh, I am not going to have any impact at all. And in the consulting world, it's really hard to like, I don't pick who I work for, because I was just a junior intermediate engineer. So I was kind of working for projects that really were misaligned from a lot of my belief systems. Mm-hmm. And so that would have been probably like 2012-ish that I was like, knew that I was gonna probably cut engineering out. And then I got divorced, and then I moved back here, and then engineering cut me out because I came back for an engineering job. And then when I landed, or shortly before I came back, I found out that the project that I was supposed to work on kind of fell through, and since I hadn't signed anything, my job intern fell through.
Yeah.
So, but it, it was perfect. I needed some time to take some space to like really figure myself out. Mm-hmm. Like I hadn't taken any time to do that. So I was unemployed for a couple months, and it was the best thing forever. I could just fall apart and just completely crack wide open and just be dust on the floor, and then slowly mold that back together again. And part of all that was the Floatation Centre. Was just, I wanted to float, and I remember laying on my bed. I was like, oh, okay, where can I go floating? And the closest place is Montreal. And I was like, man, that is like 13 hours or 12 hours away. How important is that to me? And then I was like, man, I could probably do that here, because meditation had played such a huge role in like my own like personal growth, that I was like, oh yeah, I just want everyone to meditate. Everyone get in there and meditate.
Yeah.
And I knew floating helps induce that state. And then just by like scooting around online and recognizing that it's such a transparent industry, because we need to dispel any of those like 1960s woo-woo myths and stuff of like intramuscular ketamine injections and all this stuff, right? Like,
good God.
We had it like so it's all out there.
Yeah.
And I quickly realized it's like I could also write a business plan from this information. And then my roommate at the time, who's now our wellness coordinator and naturopathic doctor, she was like, you can do this. You have the tools to do it. And she like pushed me into it.
Yeah.
And that was 4 years ago, I guess, when we first started the whole process.
That's crazy.
Yeah, I know. It's pretty wild to think of it.
Yeah.
I like to think about how much I've changed in those past 3 or 3.5 years of being a business owner. And one of my other favorite words besides equanimity is betterment. And I like to think that I've always been working on that along the way. And so every time like I recapitulate about like whether it's past day or year or whatever, I know that I'm becoming a better person. And that, coupled with floating in the Floatation Centre and even being a business owner, has really like fanned those flames a lot too. So yeah, I'm very happy with where I'm at, because it's not engineering.
Yeah, that's awesome. Well, how long were you an engineer for?
So 5 years. I practiced for 5 years. So I had all of my work experience to get my PN, which is like your professional engineering designation. But I didn't write the 2 exams. And I all I had to do was write the exams, and I was going to be a PN, and then I just realized I don't even need to do that anymore. Just some letters after my name that don't mean what I thought they would.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so when you were initially in the process of heading down the road to engineer, was anything like what you're experiencing now on your mind? Did you see any of it coming at all at that time? Were you meditating at that point? Or?
So I have always like on and off dabbled with meditation. Like even as a kid, my mom's always had this major spiritual influence on me, and she had those cassettes of the Japanese water flute over, and like bamboo in the background.
Yeah.
So I had meditated, but it wasn't probably until 2009 when I started a more solid meditation practice. And then within the last 5 years, where that's even become more of a daily practice, and it may not be every single morning, but throughout the day practice.
Yeah. So what was meditation like coming into it for you? What were you working on, and what did you wind up settling on? I know there seems to be an endless amount of different ways you can go about meditating, and I know for me it was difficult to just kind of find where my sweet spot was with it, and I was wondering what that process might have been like for you.
Well, the first time that I tried to meditate as a kid, I thought that meditation meant that you were going to levitate. So you remember that, like,
Yeah.
light as a feather, light as a feather. I remember laying there listening to my mom's guided meditation tapes, and I was hiding beside the side of her bed so no one would see me with this, like, Walkman on. And I was like, oh, light as a feather, oh my God, am I lifting up? You know, I thought that was going to happen. It didn't, or maybe it did, I don't know. And then it became more for calming the mind, for those sorts of benefits, like maybe more mental health benefits. And then I would say in the past 5 years it's been more that's not like, you know, helping with, like, you know, calming the mind, but a bit more of consciousness exploration, whatever that may be. So but I'm always reminded that the importance of meditation is showing up, but also even if your mind wanders for 20 minutes, when you bring it back.
Yeah.
It's always about the bringing it back. And so sometimes I find mantras that really work for me that I want to maybe repeat, like Sat Chit Ananda, truth, consciousness, bliss, even Yam, which is like the heart chakra, what that vibration resonates with, like 528 hertz or something. But for example, with floating, I almost set an intention before I float, whereas with my more daily meditation practice, it's more about just showing up and and breathing, and just being there for myself. So,
right on.
Yeah. Do you use, like, guided meditations at all, or?
I've experimented before with them, and I never found I got much from them necessarily.
Yeah.
So it, like, for me too, it's definitely different things at different times, and depending on what I need or what else I'm kind of focusing on, and what's kind of currently emphasized in my mind as something to contemplate at the time.
Yeah.
And so for me, well, what was confusing for me was I would, like, beat myself up over not having a clear mind, right? And it was honestly kind of when I, like, over the last 2 years, I think I switched back more towards studying Western psychology as opposed to Eastern things. I had just read years, like 4 or 5 years straight of just, like, everything I could get from Ron Doss and Alan Watts and the old books, and so when I finally went back to the Western psychology, it, like, filled in certain gaps, and for me it was like, okay, like, sometimes when I sit there, I actually need my mind to run through whatever it needs to run through, because it needs to do that. Like, there's something that won't work itself out until I've thought it through, and then sometimes it happens in the float tank where it's just, I finally get the chance to go off on this one thread, and then I finally, like, just come to terms with it in whatever way, and sometimes it's through the process of actively, consciously contemplating over it, and then also letting the mind just go where it wants to, and so there's times where, say, it feels good to do that, and then I feel more light after that thing has kind of massaged itself out of my psyche in some way. So, like, the more Western idea, I guess, I think is like that these things are nagging at you for a reason, or something inside of you that needs to be expressed, or it's a knot, or it's somewhere you're holding tension. And you're holding on to something, at least, and so kind of going deeper into the thinking side of it, whereas before I was studying so many things that were all just super emphasized on not thinking at all and constantly just bringing yourself back to the breath, back to the breath, back to the breath. And so now when I sit down and meditate, it's more like I'll let it go if it feels like it kind of lines up with me, because there are times where it's just nonsense, just complete streams of crap.
I know. And you're, like, thinking about your thoughts, and then your thoughts are thinking about your thoughts, and it's just this, like,
it's just ridiculous
snowball effect sometimes. Absolutely.
So I guess for me, the practice turned into kind of recognizing when I seriously had something to sort out, and sometimes I'll write about it too, or when it's just pure nonsense, and it feels better to just, just hear and feel the fan on my skin and the odd car